Welcome to More Than Miles, where we use storytelling and expert interviews to empower endurance athletes and healthcare providers. I'm Dr. Kate Mihivik-Edwards, physical therapist, author, educator, entrepreneur, and former endurance athlete.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Saunders, physical therapist, runner, and triathlete, and together we're your co-hosts. Our goal is to always keep our athletes healthy on and off the road, because we know that our athletes are so much more than their body and their sport. We're glad you're on this journey with us. Now let's get to the show.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to More Than Miles. We have just Kate and Kacy on the mic today. I don't know if Barry can add some like hip hop music in the background here because today's episode is called Toe Jam. Kate was supposed to start beatboxing there, but she didn't. It's fine. There we go. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So anyway, we're gonna be talking about exactly what maybe toe jam would apply. I don't know what it implies to you personally, but weird issues that may happen or occur in the feet. So as runners, we know that we don't have the best feet in the world for many reasons. Most of being shoved in a running shoe for so many hours a week, especially now in the summer. It's very hot and lots of sweat and all that good glamorous stuff. So this is going to be a glamorous episode. So yeah, put your seatbelts on and we'll get right into toe jam.
Well, the reason this whole episode came up is we were thinking about things that happen with runners typically, and we were laughing. I can't remember why, but we were laughing about how ugly everyone thinks your feet are when you're a runner, like for one reason or another. And I don't know about you, but when I would go get a pedicure, I'd be like, don't touch my calluses. Don't touch my calluses. I want them there because I need them. I've been training with them.
I need them
to protect my feet. And so I would never let them shave off my calluses whenever it comes to a pedicure because I had worked hard to get them.
Yeah. Yeah. This kind of reminds me of something I saw on Instagram. It was like a reel of multiple parts, but one part of the reel was the woman on the phone, and she's like, "Hi, do you offer discounts? I only have 7 toenails." Because yeah, we will frequently lose toenails as well. So yeah, but going to get a pedicure is an adventure as a runner.
That's right. So why don't we start with toenails, actually, because you brought it up. Sounds lovely. There are 2 things, well, I guess 3, you kind of mentioned it, things that really happen a lot with runners and their toenails. 1 is that we lose them. 2 is that they're black. So usually they're black before we lose them. And 3 is you can get really bad ingrown toenails if you're not cutting them properly. So I think if we can kind of talk a little bit about those 3 things, hopefully we can save some of those toenails for somebody.
Yeah, save the toenails. Yeah, so I was actually thinking as I was sort of prepping for this episode is I think there are measures we can take to prevent black toenails, but are black toenails necessarily always a bad thing, right? Or they're something that happens, and there are things we should take measures to prevent them. But, if it happens, right? That's how I usually look at this type of thing. But so the first few things that come to mind to try to prevent black toenails is making sure that your shoes are fitted correctly and are the correct shape for your foot. So black toenails occur from repetitive pressure on the nail bed itself, and so it creates a bruise of some sort, and that will cause us eventually to lose the toenail. So the big thing here is, so both your shoe size can be too big or too small. So it can either be compression because the toe box is too small, and your foot is too close to the edge of the front of the shoe, or that your shoe is too big and your foot is sliding a lot. So especially if you're doing like a downhill course, such as Boston or Revel or one of these where there is some elevation change, or, it's not exclusive to downhill, of course, but the more that foot slides into the front of the toe box, the more likely we are to get black toenails. And they can be painful, absolutely. But I know many times I don't really know they're there until I take my shoe off and I'm like, oh, hello, black toenails.
Well, I think that what people can do, so one of the things we always tell people is to make sure that you get your shoes a half size bigger. than you would normally wear for regular shoes, because that gives your foot the ability to expand as you're running, especially longer distances. Our feet always swell a little bit when we run longer distances, particularly when we're training for things like, over 10 miles. So that's one thing people can do, is keep that shoe a little bit bigger. The next thing, like you said, you don't want a lot of movement around if possible. So you want the right size in both directions, but you can also tie your shoes so that your foot is not moving too much in the heel cup, so too much forward or backwards. A lot of people that wear the elastic shoelaces, because they're easy to get on and off, they end up with black toenails because of the compression that occurs, but also because of the extra movement. So actually having laces that tie can help prevent the black toenails as well. Those are two things. And then having some good socks. Good socks are important too, because it's friction. So it's pressure, and it's, blood pooling under the nail that eventually lifts it up, and it's movement. So doing that those things would actually really help prevent the black toenail. But like you said, Kacy, sometimes people just get them or are prone to them. The other thing I would say is make sure that the toe box is not too narrow. Some running shoes have more narrow toe boxes than others. So make sure that your foot, size of your foot or width of your foot is appropriate in your shoe.
Yeah. And it depends on the shape of your foot too. So I have a small foot, but I have a wider foot, right? And so different shoe brands work better for me. And some people have really more of a narrow foot, which can cause its own kind of host of sort of modifications we have to make to the shoe as well. So it's more of like the shape of your foot, right? Than it's like if the glass slipper sort of analogy here, right? Shoes fit differently. And so yeah, I mean, I have different issues than someone who would have narrow foot.
That's right. And I think that too, we have to remember that our foot changes. The size and the shape of the foot actually change based on many things. So if you're pregnant or postpartum, your feet will often expand, and you might need wider shoes eventually. If you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of foot strength between your toes or in your intrinsic muscles, or even in your foot and your ankle, that can lead to a flatter foot eventually. So there's all these things to kind of take into consideration, but knowing some of those things are pretty easy to change or modify and prevent these black toenails. And then black toenails can turn into lost toenails if they're not taken care of.
That's right. That's right. And I think this depends on the location of the black toenail as well. So big toe versus the other four toes, they'll behave a little bit differently after getting a black toenail. I don't know, Kate, every time I've had a black toenail, I've lost it. I've lost it.
You have?
Yeah.
I think most of the time you do lose it. I've had a few that I didn't lose, but it was like partially black. So I think it depends on the damage.
Correct.
And I also find, like, so we were talking about my lovely husband's running gait before this episode, and how he uses a lot of calves. He has nice big calves, but when he lands, he actually almost like slams the front of his foot or the forefoot into the ground. So every time he lands, that shoe runs into the toes. And that's another way that it can occur. It can happen because of a particular running form, just because it's taking the brunt of the force when you're doing that. So that's just something I thought about when I was thinking about my husband's running form.
Lovely, lovely running form. That you haven't tried to change, right, Kate?
No, it's not worth it at this point. There are some things you don't do in a marriage, and I don't treat him for many, many reasons, but he doesn't listen. It's the number one reason, and it becomes frustrating. So it's better for us if he comes to see you or somebody else.
Right. Absolutely.
So the next thing when it comes to toenails would be thinking about ingrown toenails. So I actually have this interesting story about a patient. I had this patient that came to me. She actually came to me in a boot, and she was recovering from a stress fracture. It's a long story. She's actually in the boot far too long. And she started to get some osteopenia, which wasn't very good. And she came out of the boot. Everything was going really well. She was progressing. Her walking was getting better. She was getting stronger. And then one day she came in and she had this horrible limp, like couldn't put weight on her foot. And I was like, oh no, we've got another stress fracture. She had osteopenia, so I was worried about it. Well, after kind of a little bit of time, I finally looked at her toe and I'm like, you have an ingrown toenail. And she said, what? And we looked at it and I said, I think you should go get that taken care of. And I bet your gait will get better. And she did. She went to see a podiatrist that day, and the podiatrist helped her, like cut the nail properly, like helped make it so it wasn't as inflamed. And next time I saw her, she was walking with great gait. And it was really just that ingrown toenail that was so painful she couldn't push off. And ingrown toenails are something that I've had in the past, and I'm telling you, they're so painful for just this little thing on your foot.
Yeah, I've had mild ones before as well. But I mean, I think what a great story, right? Like that's the best case scenario in that situation, right? And yeah, we're going to talk about calluses later, but those can also be really painful. And so sometimes we're looking for, what muscle or tendon is causing someone's pain when literally it's just something going on with cosmetically with the foot. And so that's when our friends, the podiatrists, are the best to come in and deal with those like foot skin specific issues. But yeah, so learning how to cut your nails properly, which sounds kind of funny, I guess, but making sure that you don't have any sharp edges that could lead to like an ingrown toenail, for example.
That's right. So cutting them straight across and not trying to get them like down and rounded down is actually really helpful for runners. So the straighter across, the less likely they will turn into ingrown toenails. Who knew? I didn't know until I had one, and it was painful to walk, and my podiatrist taught me about that.
Yeah. I think I think one thing that can help with something like this too is just alternating between wearing shoes and like not wearing shoes, or also wearing some sort of like sandals so that your foot isn't in an enclosed space too much, so that those toenails can grow more flat versus curved down. It's more of like the goldfish analogy, where like the fish will only grow to the size of the tank that it's in.
I don't know if that's true.
What? Yes, it is. For the fish, if you put a fish in a small tank, it's not going to outgrow the tank.
I don't know if that's true. And also, your toenails are going to grow no matter no matter what size shoe.
It just won't grow.
I'm teasing you.
I know.
I love you, Kacy. I don't know anything about fish, by the way.
I mean, I can't say I'm a fish expert either, but
unfortunately, my son has fish, and we've lost several this year because of our lack of knowledge.
Oh no.
It's always sad. We have a fish
to learn about fish.
No, I'm working on it. We're working on it. We have a little graveyard in our backyard. It's really bad. There's also squirrels and other things in there, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, so I think that's enough about the toenails.
About toenails, yeah.
Yeah. What about calluses? So let's talk a little bit about that, why they happen, and are they good, are they bad, or what should we do about them? Do we need to do anything about them?
Sure. So calluses are our skins is more of a deposition of skin tissue where there is more pressure. So it's kind of another way of our body armoring us against pressure. And we know that, similar to how the bones and muscles respond to the stress we put on it, our skin is very similar. So the skin is like, I always give body parts little like voices and things. But so the skin is like, whoa, we've got a lot of pressure here. We need more skin to protect this area. And so at this very core, that's what they are. And so as weird as it may sound, I know I have this like reputation for really having a foot fetish, like a literal foot fetish. Like I like treating the foot. And so no matter if I'm treating the person's foot or not, I'm going to look at their calluses because it's similar to when we look at the tread on someone's running shoe. We can tell where people put pressure through their foot based on where their calluses are. And so, and of course, again, this has to do with shape of the shoe, shape of the foot. This could be an indication someone's in the wrong shoe sometimes. So calluses are, I would say, like, by and large, they're good because they help protect our foot. But we can get, if we're like really putting a lot of pressure through a singular part of the foot, they can get really thick and actually painful. And I was dealing with somewhat of an issue like this, but I know our colleague Elizabeth was working with an athlete once, and trying to figure out if they had like a sesamoiditis, a sort type of situation, or what was going on in this foot. And literally just the callus had become painful. So once they had the callus removed, they were good to go. So by and large, I would say that they're a good thing because they protect our feet. But at the same time, they can give us a lot of information in terms of maybe changes we can make either to our running gait, to the equipment, so our shoes that we wear. And then in the worst case can become painful.
Yeah, and sometimes a blister can get stuck underneath or like on the edge of a callus, which is really uncomfortable. So again, if you're somebody that's having pain in your feet, I always say before you get too worried about it being some big musculoskeletal issue, check your calluses, check for blisters, check for ingrown toenails, check for black toenails, all of those kinds of things, because they might actually be the reason you're walking funny or in pain, even though they're not the first thing that we think of when we think of foot pain, or at least that you and I think of. I think of stress fracture or tendonitis or tendinopathy or plantar fasciitis or some other thing, and most runners do as well. But sometimes it's so easy. It's changing the way we tie our shoes, changing the socks that we're in, changing, something like that can really make a huge difference.
Yeah. I'm about 6 weeks, I think, back into running more. And I can feel that my calluses are coming back, which is a little bit of an uncomfortable process that I didn't really think about once I was getting back into running. So I was like, oh, I gotta tell my patients about it or warn them, I guess. Because yeah, when you're not putting as much force through the foot, the calluses can like reduce and go down because again, the body's like, oh, we don't need these anymore. We're good. Yeah. So yeah, just all kinds of interesting things that can happen there.
And I would like to put it out to the audience that Kacy told me she's never had a blister before. So she is a foot prodigy because I don't know a single runner besides you that has not had a blister before.
I almost feel bad. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing right to teach other people to do it.
I don't know. I think it's some people are more prone to it, or everybody's more prone to it except you.
I don't understand. I'm like, how are people so bad at wearing shoes that they get blisters?
It's not that. I mean, I think there are a lot of different things that happen with blisters. So like you said, us building up our intensity of running and our training, and you'll get calluses that'll slowly build. So anytime you do training, it's really important because what happens is your body starts to accommodate for the forces that you are putting on it over time. And it's that accommodation that allows us to get through a race or get through whatever event comfortably. And that includes your skin. It's not just muscles. It's just not just tendons. It's not just bones. So a lot of times blisters will occur if someone is overtraining, they've never done a 10-mile run, and then they're going out to do a 15-mile run. That's like a traditional time when you might get a blister because it's a friction issue. The other thing is, when your feet get wet, like in the summer, if you're running through, a sprinkler or something, or extra sweat and you don't have socks that are wicking away the sweat. By now, I think almost everybody has to have sweat wicking socks. I can't imagine that anyone's running in cotton socks now, but I maybe it's still happening. I don't know, but if you're running in cotton socks, this is your announcement to get rid of them right now. Just get rid of them and just get the sweat wicking socks. But I think
treat yourself to some good socks.
Treat yourself to some good socks. I mean, socks are actually quite expensive now. We could go down that route. We don't need to, but it's shocking how expensive they are, but they do a lot more than they used to when they were just straight cotton. Okay, well, now that we've covered all the nasty things that can happen to your toes and your feet, so blisters, black toenails, calluses, falling off toenails, ingrown toenails, all really lovely runner issues. Let's jump into this other issue that is actually fairly common, which is a bunion. And we'll talk about how that can impact your running, and then what some things that you can do to help yourself with bunions, why they happen, and that type of thing.
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics, mostly because I've been on a mission to optimize my mechanics with the bunion that I do have, more on one foot than the other. So I've been kind of taking, all I've learned over the years and experimenting with things on myself. And so anyway, I could talk about this, could be an entire episode just on bunions. But anyway,
we better not
going to
do
get that deep into it. But anyway, so broadly, what a bunion is an abnormal articulation of the great toe or the first toe joint, where the segment of the toe is pointing more inward towards midline. And this, again, has to do with an abnormal change in that joint. So this can be structural in terms of that, there's genetics at play, or that's just how your body has sort of grown and adapted. Or a lot of times there's thought of being related to wearing tight shoes or like high heels for women. But obviously this can happen to men as well. And sometimes, oftentimes related to footwear, but not always. For example, mine is from a turf toe injury, which is a hyperextension injury of the toe. I, being the, young soccer player I was, just looked up on YouTube how to tape it. I taped the crap out of it for a while and never actually allowed it to heal properly. So this is what I've got.
Shocking.
And so what?
That sounds so different than a lot of people I know.
Yeah, I know. So weird.
So weird.
Can't believe you just didn't be smart about that.
Oh.
So the bunion itself, it can cause more blister and callus issues, because it does jut out a little bit from the rest of the foot and can rub on shoes regardless of how big your toe box is. I mean, maybe if you're in ultras or topos or something like that, that can help alleviate it. So that's a good sort of tip if you do have bunions that seem to be painful from friction or even from the pressure. But I think my big soapbox on bunions is that we can do things to manage them. They don't necessarily, or they absolutely don't mean that you need to have surgery on them. I had a patient give me advice once, like, you should really get surgery on that. That's only going to get worse.
I think bunions are one of those things that people assume that once they have them, they're stuck with them and there's nothing that they can do. And that's where it's wrong, right? So bunions can be really painful. Sometimes they're not, especially in the beginning, but there are a lot of different things we can do in PT to help with them, whether it's recommendations for wearing a toe spacer that you can easily get, order online, either when you're barefoot or in your shoes, to working on your foot intrinsic strength and the small muscles of your foot, and learning how to control that pronation part of your gait and your walking and running, and even working through your hip and your hip extension patterns and your hip abduction and adduction strength and external rotation. So like working through things all the way up the chain so that when your foot is on the ground, it doesn't go into that overpronation where you're really pushing off at that kind of middle part of, or that knuckle of your toe, creating even more force through the joint than you need. So I think that there are so many different things that can be done. And even sometimes just changing your shoes can make a huge impact when it comes to bunions.
Right. And, and maintaining the range of motion within the joint too. We know we lose great toe extension over time if we don't tend to these properly, because Another thing, whether it's painful or not, is we learn to get around the bunion. And so I'll see a lot of like wiggle in people's shoe or wiggle of the foot at toe off in running gait because they're just getting around using that big toe at all, which can lead to stiffness because you're not extending through the big toe. And so it can get stiff because you're not using that range of motion properly. And that's what helps prevent a lot of these more like arthritic and painful conditions. We can maintain as much movement as we possibly can. I did want to elaborate a little bit on toe spacers and spreaders, right? So a toe spacer, is just a little long oval shaped. I think they're made of silicone or rough silicone, I think usually. If you Amazon this, you can definitely find plenty of options there. But this just goes in between your first and second toe. It helps with I'm like moving my hands around like you guys can see me at home, but it helps with the alignment of the big toes to help slow down that progression of that toe going even more inward. And the nice thing about these is that they don't take up too much room in the shoes. You can wear them with most shoes as long as it's not too small of a shoe or like a flat or something like that. You probably cosmetically wouldn't want the toe spacer if you're wearing flats as well. But so with most shoes, you can fit that in there, and that's something habitually you can wear all the time when you are in shoes. Toe spreaders actually go in between each individual toe. So this looks kind of like what you get when you go to get a pedicure. It's a little bit more heavy duty. I actually have mine on right now because I'm just at home because I'm such a nerd. And what these do is they help, because the other thing is that we get like toe crowding with bunion or this kind of bunion pattern, or just from wearing, shoes that don't allow our feet to splay out. And so if we have those spacers in between each toe, this helps our feet our toes spread out a bit. And it helps with the alignment of not only the joint, but a lot of the muscles underneath. So we can actually strengthen the muscles if they're in that better alignment, because a lot of our muscles of our foot and the tendons that go into our foot operate on a pulley system. And so if that pulley isn't aligned best, then we aren't able to strengthen it as well. So the spreaders are more for, when you're at home, relaxing, walking around barefoot. I know that some diehards will claim that you shouldn't be wearing a shoe that you can't wear toe spreaders in. I'm not that diehard when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't think it's super practical, but anyway, that's the difference between the two tools. And I highly recommend them for people who do have bunions.
Yes, so do I. I recommend them to almost every one of my patients. And I can think of a handful of people right now that I've recently treated for bunions because of pain. And so the ones that I've treated recently are all actually running and doing fine because they're using those tools. We've adjusted their shoes appropriately. We've gotten them strong enough so that they can actually support their foot and push off appropriately. And I think it's just like every other injury or every other issue out there. If you start to lose range of motion or you start to lose strength in one area, then all the other areas follow. And so if you start to lose motion in that big toe, then you're going to end up with less dorsiflexion in your ankle and then possibly less hip extension. And so keeping that range of motion through all of those areas can help prevent you from overusing or putting too much force through that great toe and that joint, which can be a huge benefit.
Right. Yeah. And I'm gonna ask as if I don't know. So what kind of shoe recommendations did you make for your patients?
So it's interesting. It varies depending on the patient, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this too, which is interesting.
Spicy.
Yeah. So this could be actually good. So a couple different things. So for many or a lot of people, I will say maybe a little bit a toe box that's not too wide and not too narrow. Definitely not too narrow. A lot of people have toe boxes that are too narrow. They can't use the tools that we've described, but also it'll start to push them in. So something that's really comfortable where they feel like they've got enough space in their toe box, and it varies person to person. So that's one thing I'll say. But then I teach them how to appropriately tie their shoes so that they can so that they can get out of pronation if they need to, and then slowly tie them normally over time, because there's a trick with the tying of the shoes. But if I have somebody that's in a lot of pain, and this goes for not so any kind of like great toe arthritis and pain in that great toe, I might put them in the carbon shoe. And I'll put them in the carbon shoe because you can roll through that toe with a lot less pain because of how rigid it is. And we used to use, I'm probably not even going to remember that. Oh yeah, what are the plates? Spring plates. We used to put spring plates in shoes before carbon was in running shoes. And those spring plates are essentially an insert that goes in that are carbon that prevent you from rolling through the toes. And so instead of getting those spring plates now, I just have them wear a carbon plated shoe for more than I would normally. And usually by doing that, they have a lot less pain. Now, it's not something that I will rely on forever unless it's a very arthritic joint, and it's the difference between them running and not running. So they may never, they may not be able to run at all if they're not in that kind of shoe. But if we can, after they get stronger, after they're more mobile, I'll say, okay, let's wear carbon shoes sometimes and another shoe the rest of the time, because I try to keep people out of carbon 100% of the time, unless it's something where they can't help it. So I wonder what your recommendation is.
So yeah, I don't disagree. The rocker, the kind of the rocker that plates allow, I think does help decrease the demand on extension through the toe. And so, whether this is a permanent change where it is, like you said, more of an arthritic condition where we're going to do our best to maintain as much range of motion, we're still going to work on all the strength, but in terms of running comfortably, they're going to need some sort of rocker bottom of the shoe to help them run pain-free. Then that's what we'll do. And so there's a few different shoe models that have more, and I actually think that they're starting to make more shoes with a rocker forefoot than they used to, because runners are starting to prefer them. They like that kind of spring that they feel when they go forward. So whether it has a carbon plate in it or not, we can play with some of those as well.
So I just want to make a quick point about rocker bottom shoes, is that the apex, or where that rocker goes through, is really important. You said a rocker in the front of the foot or the forefoot, which I don't know if you don't know about rocker bottom shoes, you might not know that that can be anywhere within the shoe. So it's important the location of the rocker bottom, or the general location.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the rigidity of the plate can help too. And even, I think, it depends on the shoe, but even the nylon plate can give a little bit of assistance here. So again, it takes a little bit of trial and error, and it's very individual, right? And so we have to see, what the pattern is with people. And I do agree that we have to find the right toe box size, right? I think in general, we want to make sure that they have enough room for the bunion to not rub too much on the inside part of the shoe. And so there's more options for wide toe box shoes now than I think there used to be. And so the big issue with people getting Ultra shoes specifically with this is that, so Ultra makes one model that has a 4mm drop, which is still pretty low. But all their other models are 0 drop. And so if we're thinking about an athlete who has a bunion, they probably also have limited dorsiflexion, or they tend to not control pronation very well, and 0 drop could be very, very problematic for other parts of their foot. Yeah. So enter the brand Topo, which makes varying drops with also the wider shoe. So, or wider toe box, excuse me. So just a note to think, if you're listening, be like, oh yeah, a wider toe box seems to make sense to decrease the friction. We do need to make sure that that person can handle 0 drop, or to look for other alternatives if we think that's going to be problematic.
Yeah, and like we always say, I think it's really important to find a local shoe company, like a local shoe store in your area. If you're someone that really needs to try a bunch of different kinds of shoes and test them out, it's better than like a big brand name store, because usually the people at the shoe stores, the local stores, are very, very knowledgeable about the shoes. They'll let you try on a whole bunch of pairs so that you can walk and run in them in the store. And then I know several of the stores that we work with even have the policy, like they can take them home and run with them. And as long as, they don't get them really muddy and destroy them and all those kinds of things, they can return them if they're not working in a week or so, which I think is such a huge benefit. Plus, shopping local, I think, is important too. So if you're somebody that's kind of struggling with a bunion or any kind of, foot issue that we've talked about, and you need to check out a pair of shoes, I would definitely go to your local running shoe store and really seek them out and have conversations with them. And they may even say, like, someone in the store who's particularly good at X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, highly recommend just going and trying on a bunch of shoes. And obviously you can't do that if you're shopping online. So, but yeah, love the plug for shopping local as well. I wanted to note about like what kind of strengthening things we might do.
Yeah, we almost forgot that. That's such a great idea. That was in the list in the beginning, but we didn't go through specific things. Yeah,
right. So I think every exercise can be a foot exercise if we're paying attention to our foot, right?
I agree.
So this is kind of a nice thing, right? It's like, oh gosh, now I have 5 exercises just for my foot. And, in some of these situations where we really are trying to correct some of those mechanics, they can be really tedious and small movements and kind of annoying. But once you get the hang of it, usually that kind of neuromuscular control sticks, and then we can just kind of progress. And a lot of it looks like, a normal strength training routine where we have single leg exercises. But so by and large, what we want to do is strengthen the intrinsics, which are the muscles that are unique only to the foot, right? So if we if we look at our foot, a lot of the muscles are actually tendons that originate somewhere in the calf, and then their tendons go into the foot itself and work sort of like a pulley, like I said before, to control the foot. The intrinsics are the muscles that are only in the foot. And so if we really focus on our foot posture when we're doing, or what I call foot posture, when we're doing single leg exercises, and really trying to even out the distribution of weight across the entire foot, lifting that arch slightly, then we're able to, that's what's going to kick those muscles on. And so if we are aware of what where our weight is and what muscles are active in our foot, then we can translate that to single leg deadlifts, single leg squats, double leg exercises. Even we can think about this as well. And so a lot of this is trying to get the big toe engaged to the ground. And later today, I'm going to go and take some videos of some of the Mobo board exercises I like to use, just coincidentally, because I love the foot. But if you haven't heard of the Mobo board, I think we've had Jay on the podcast before. So go ahead and go back and listen to his episode. It's really, really great and can explain what the Mobo board is all about. But it's a great tool for teaching people how to engage through the big toe. And that's something that a lot of us lose, either when we get weak in terms of controlling pronation, or we just aren't using our foot correctly.
Yeah, and I would like to mention something that you said in the very beginning of all that, which is the neuromuscular control component. So a lot of people get really discouraged because in the beginning they'll get these super boring exercises that they're not really sure if they're going to do anything. And I promise you that we are never going to give you exercises that aren't going to do anything. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for your brain and your body to kind of connect, or your brain and your muscles to connect. So just think about it this way. For the first few weeks, you might get these really boring exercises where we're asking to really engage the big toe, really working on the arch, really working on the intrinsics, doing some mobility. So we'll definitely have you doing, ankle dorsiflexion mobility, hip mobility, great toe mobility, those kinds of things. And then they'll progress to more interesting exercises, which will be double leg and single leg, like Kacy mentioned. And again, making sure that we're not just addressing the muscles that are from the knee all the way down to the foot. We also have to address everything above that, because even our arm swing impacts how our foot lands on the ground. So when we're looking at somebody that might have any foot issue, anything that we've talked about today or not talked about today, we're also doing a run gait analysis. We're breaking down the form, seeing like what different components of your run gait, how are impacting your foot. How are you loading that foot and why? And so it really does, it's this bigger picture. And if you're just someone that has a bunion and it hurts, like start small, right? Start with, the toe spacers. Start with making sure your shoes are correct. Make sure that you're getting that basic control of the foot and the ankle, and then move your way up. That's what I would say, because I think it's much bigger than just that local area. And there are so many tools out there that you can use to help with your balance, whether that's the what Kacy was talking about that Jay did, the mobile board, or something else. But making sure that great toe is engaged, making sure you're using all the foot. We typically make our athletes do a lot of things barefoot just so that they can use the foot while they're doing it. We add rotational control, not just singular plane, because we have to negotiate and manage rotational control during running as well.
Yeah, so typical end statement of our podcast that everything affects everything.
I know. So if you just fast forwarded the entire thing, you'll hear what we always say is it starts in the foot and it goes all the way up to the head. And nothing or everything in between is a possibility. Nothing's off limits.
That's right. That's right.
And there's been a couple of blogs written about bunions, I know, for their Precision website. So there's more information there. And then I swear to God, I say this all the time, but we're putting the RunSource app on the Apple Store today. It takes 5 days to approve. So if you are having any kind of foot pain or not sure what kind of exercises to do to help you, Kacy has an awesome foot video explaining like the basic foot postures and that kind of thing on the RunSource app. And we've got a lot of those videos and exercises that you can do. And we have injury programs around the foot too.
Very, very exciting stuff.
I think you have almost all the foot videos. I'm just saying.
Surprise, surprise.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. I know that it was an interesting episode and we just had to call it Toe Jam. We're so sorry. It's kind of disgusting. It gives me gross thoughts in my head, but it just makes me laugh at the same time. So
hopefully it gets you interested. You came for the name, you stayed for the excellent information about the foot and toes.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for hanging out with us. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. As if you can't tell, we absolutely love spreading knowledge about endurance athletes and their health.
Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on iTunes or whichever platform you happen to be listening in from. Also, share the show with your friends, running buddies, training partners, family, your dog, or scream it from the rooftops. Whatever works for you. See you soon!